The following program is made possible in part by funding from the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy and Clear the Air. It's Old-Timey Day at Mount Hor African Methodist Church, held under its grand live oaks on Edisto Island.
God has called us to bring all of creation back to Him and to love and respect all of creation.
They worship God amid the very splendor of His creation. It's an old low country tradition here in South Carolina.
When our forefathers were in slavery and even afterwards, there was a great connection with nature, and that basically is an old African tradition, living off the land, being one with the land, being in harmony as a part of creation but not a master of creation. And so that type of thinking continued on in our religious thought.
These are our treasured places. To the people of Edisto Island and the Ace Basin, it's their magical deep-water creeks and marshes. To residents of Hilton Head, it's an early morning round of golf. Residents and visitors alike treasure all that is historic Charleston. And tucked away in a remote corner of the upstate, South Carolinians enjoy hiking and camping along mountain trails and savor any opportunity to fish the lovely streams of the southern Appalachians, even when the trout aren't biting.
Well, that's why they call it fishing and not catching. But that's not really the most important thing. The most important thing is getting out here and enjoying nature, seeing the beauty of the place, and experiencing solitude and getting away from the hectic stress of modern-day life.
The pleasant sunny weather belies a troubling reality looming on the horizon, the much-talked-about issue of global warming. It's been all over the media, a rash of magazine cover stories, and global warming receives ever-increasing television news coverage.
Breaking news overnight, unstoppable. 1,500 of the world's top experts announced the global warming genie is out of the bottle.
Video images of faraway melting ice caps play across the screen. So, where does the issue of global warming sit with the people of South Carolina?
Sportsmen in South Carolina are responsible for bringing over $1 billion into our state annually. And in fact, 1 out of every 4 South Carolinians either hunt or fish. So what better group to go to ask about global warming? This spring, we conducted a poll in South Carolina, a random sampling of license holders. We asked them what they thought about global warming. 68% believe that global warming exists. That same group also believed that it's being caused by the burning of fossil fuels, and more importantly, they want to see action, not only on the national level, but 90% of them would endorse a state energy plan. So who are these sportsmen? Well, they're basically conservatives.
Considering the Bush administration's resistance to the idea of human-induced climate change, the poll results come as a major surprise. About 70% of those polled by the South Carolina Wildlife Federation voted for George Bush in both elections.
And because of that, they feel they have the right to ask for immediate action. There are 90% of them that want to see immediate action on a national level.
While significant changes in the weather of a planet usually occur in geologic time spans, a disturbing aspect of the present warming is how rapidly it is occurring, even in the course of a human lifespan. South Carolina's old-timers note the changes.
But it was colder then. Now, it definitely was. I have seen Chattooga River froze over in the stellar places where you could walk across it. And of older people than me had told about driving a yoke of oxen or a team across on them froze. I never saw that, but I've seen it cold enough for it to be froze over.
Jack Lombard, still lives in the house he was born in 80 years ago, nestled in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Escarpment. An avid outdoorsman, Jack always tracks the weather.
One thing that I've noticed, I've got a little old weather radio in there, and every morning I turn it on and get my weather, and that way I don't have to listen to them on the radio or television go through for 10 minutes telling what they told there in a half a minute. And with that, most of the time they'll tell what the record high and the record low was for that day. And more times than not, the record low was years back than it is on up here. I mean, the record high is the same way. Now, I mean, if you go to comparing them, I wonder if this other stuff is really what they say.
While global warming spells trouble the world over, its consequences will be felt right here, on the shores of the Palmetto State, bringing problems that will ripple inland, affecting everyone and everything, from our treasured natural places to our very livelihoods.
We were contacted by some people who are tuned into what's going on in the environment and the bigger business community, specifically the insurance industry. And what we were hearing was that insurance companies were starting to model for global warming and what that was going to mean for insurance rates. And that was going to impact anybody who has a business along our coast. Well, most of the businesses along our South Carolina coast are small businesses.
These small businesses support the state's #1 industry, tourism, and 60% of that business comes from South Carolina's coastal region, the ground zero when it comes to global warming. Melting ice in Greenland and Antarctica, scientists believe, will cause sea levels to rise by up to 2 feet, and possibly more in the next 100 years. Bad news for an economy largely built along the coast. Sea level rise means eroding coastlines and entirely redrawn coastlines. But a higher water table also means yet higher storm surges from hurricanes, and coupled with increased hurricane intensity, also linked to global warming, it's a double whammy for which the entire state is unprepared. Remember Hurricane Rita, Wilma, and will we ever forget Katrina? The entire country was unprepared, and we remain so.
Okay, here, we've got a rescue in progress. United States Coast Guard.
Environment has never played large on the national agenda, but having doled out over $90 billion on insured losses between 2004 and 2005, the first industry to be hit in the wallet by potential impacts of global warming is the insurance industry, and they're paying close attention.
Where the rubber hits the road with regard to this issue for the industry is in the question, will the frequency and or the severity of hurricane activity in the North Atlantic, in particular for us here in the United States, will that be measurably increased in a world that is warmed by greenhouse gases? That is the fundamental question, the most vexing question facing the industry right now with regard to the prospect of climate change.
The impacts of global warming are many, are complex, and while a destabilized climate isn't fully understood, the prospect of another Katrina striking South Carolina, striking Charleston, provides more than enough reason to care. Killer storms threaten the state's lifeblood. Tourism, and its #2 industry, timber, is equally vulnerable. When Hurricane Hugo slammed into Bulls Bay in McClellanville in 1989, mowing down a 50-mile swath all the way to North Carolina and well beyond, it downed 3 times the trees lost to the Mount St. Helens eruption, 7 times the Yellowstone fires, an $8 billion loss. Fueled by increased heat from warming oceans, more frequent and more intense hurricanes could mean that Hugo-strength storms won't simply be a distant memory for South Carolinians. The consequences of global warming extend from faraway melting ice caps to South Carolina's shoreline, across the Piedmont, and into the upstate, including Dave Van Leer's favorite fishing hole, here on the upper Chattooga River.
As a result of habitat changes, land uses, and the degradation of water quality and the introduction of non-native species, the brook trout have been relegated to the headwaters of streams in the southern Appalachians. They are the most temperature sensitive of the trout species and require cold, clear water.
Even if impacts of global warming aren't all extreme, what's at stake isn't something acceptable to anyone with a connection to the outdoors.
If the water is much above 70 degrees Fahrenheit for a period of time, then that will kill the brook trout. And if it stays above 70 degrees for weeks, it will probably drive out the rainbow and brown trout as well.
While every individual, from every region, in every country, contributes to the problem of global warming pollution, the search for solutions rests equally with one carbon-loading human in China, just as in South Carolina.
The question is whether we as a state will rise to this challenge, and the reasons we should are twofold. One, the cost of not acting, the cost of continuing in this cycle of dependence on fossil fuels, and the impact of that on the low country at 7 feet above mean sea level. The costs are almost incalculable. We've got the potential flooding of this city, of salt marsh, of rice fields, of these landscapes that are iconic landscapes that are a draw for tourists, but also a reference point for people who live here and have moved here and have lived here for generations. And so the cost, it would not be even possible to properly assess them. The opportunities are substantial and identifiable.
At Clemson University's Energy Systems Laboratory, the search for a break from fossil fuel energy is as much about capitalizing on economic opportunity as it is mitigating global warming pollution. Dr. Nicholas Regas, director of the South Carolina Institute for Energy Studies, enjoys teaching a new generation of problem solvers.
South Carolina is being proactive in development of alternative clean energy, and it's being active on several fronts. It's being active on the hydrogen front, which hydrogen is more of a long-term strategy for the nation as an alternative fuel. It's also being active on the bioenergy piece. Now, South Carolina cannot compete against the Midwest in terms of corn production to, for instance, ethanol, but South Carolina possesses a lot of biomass that can be converted into bioethanol or biodiesel via new technologies that will be hopefully developed in the near future. South Carolina also possesses, and it's been documented, offshore wind potential. The state does not have land-based wind potential given its location and its climate, but the offshore wind potential of the state, which resides between 5 to 15 nautical miles off the state, has been documented. So there is considerable potential for electricity generation off the coast of South Carolina as well.
There are new economic opportunities, new technologies for energy production, renewable energy production, new technologies for conservation, exporting what we know about wonderful, efficient urban design, cities that become walkable, bikeable, more civil and civic-oriented because we draw on these 300-year-old models. So Charleston has a lot to teach, and South Carolina has a major role to play in this national debate about global warming.
The realization is upon us. It's human activity, largely the burning of fossil fuels in our automobiles and power plants, that's responsible for global warming. The public is ready for change, and several of South Carolina's major institutions are gearing up to help position the state for seizing new opportunities in the emerging carbon market. But any solution also depends on action and innovation from industry.
Time really is of the essence, and we need to seize these opportunities in the emerging carbon marketplace. And history has shown us that industry does not respond to voluntary measures alone. So we will need some form of government intervention, and this intervention They come in the form of incentives and legislation. And in order to realize success, we will need the participation and efforts of governments and industry and every private citizen to get involved.
That humans are negatively impacting life over the entire planet raises an obvious moral question. A deeply felt connection to nature among Reverend Pinckney's brethren underlies their spirited song and makes clear the truest meaning of giving praise to God's creation.
Nature is a part of who we are, and I don't think that destroying nature is godly at all. I think it's how we manage it and how we really look and respect it. I think that's what's godly about how we deal with nature.